What the Sam Hill's going on here?
The Rewatch Podcast presents the Lois and Clark Rewatch, dedicated to the series Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman on ABC. Join us each week as we investigate the origins of the Man of Steel and uncover crime in Metropolis. Send your feedback to the Rewatch Podcast at gmail.com. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/rewatchpodcast or follow us on Twitter at rewatchpod.
Oh, hey! Let's get back to it.
And welcome back to the Rewatch Podcast and our Lois and Clark Rewatch. I'm Cory.
And I'm Bernie Lomax. Speaking of resurrections.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. We're here discussing 2 more episodes of Lois and Clark, and this week's headline reads, Resurrection Fugitive. And we're discussing Resurrection and Tempest Fugitive. So let's get straight into it. Our first episode discussion, Resurrection, written by Gene Miller and Karen Kavner, directed by Joseph Scanlon, and this originally aired on March 19th of 1995.
Agent Scardino, this is Lois Lane Clark Kent.
You?
Small world.
You all know each other?
Agent Scardino?
Oh, please, call me Daniel.
Do you always leave by the window?
I left my macaroni salad on the roof.
Why didn't you identify yourself at Mason's office?
What, and spoil all our fun? Come to think of it, Kent, I don't remember you or Miss Lane here whipping out any press credentials either.
Obviously, I've missed something here. Is there a problem?
There is, if Agent Scardino was Washington's idea of solving Mason's murder.
Washington had nothing to do with this. In fact, they sort of suggested that I keep my distance. They have this crazy idea I'm some kind of loose cannon.
Gee, I wonder where they would get such a crazy idea like that.
Well, if you're not here officially, why are you here?
Because I know who designed the bomb that killed Mason Drake. A con by the name of Sean McCarthy.
That guy that was responsible for that series of drug-related bombings in '89?
The same. I lost someone very close to me in one of those bombings.
I thought McCarthy died in prison 3 weeks ago.
So they say. Hit on the DA says otherwise. I know McCarthy's M.O. like the back of my hand. I was the one that put him in prison. And somehow, he's out there again.
So your idea of solving Mason's murder is looking for a dead man?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. So, if you come across any information that might help, I'd appreciate you letting me know. I'm staying at the Bristol. Please, don't take this the wrong way, but are those eyelashes real?
Of course they're real.
Boy, they're pretty.
Following up on comments from Perry about a DEA agent coming down to investigate Mason's death, Lois and Clark break into Mason's office hoping to find leads regarding her last words she spoke to Clark. While there, a man drops down and holds them at gunpoint, grabbing a few items off Mason's desk and leaves the 2 reporters tied up while he escapes out the window. Back at the planet, Lois and Clark are introduced to the DEA agent Daniel Scardino, who is actually the man who held them at gunpoint in Mason's office. There's immediate distrust in Clark's eyes and a slight bit of attraction in Lois's as Scardino flirts heavily while sharing some information about who he suspects was behind Mason's bombing, a man named Sean McCarthy who died recently, but whose M.O. matches Mason's death. Lois and Clark visit McCarthy's mother, and after being saved by Superman from a firebomb under her porch, they obtain letters her son wrote to her before his death, hoping to find clues. Meanwhile, a man named Gables, a once great scientist at Star Labs, but now fired and shamed for having created an unauthorized virus, is planning revenge with his assistant Albie. Using a special pill smuggled in the prisons, several inmates, including McCarthy, appear to die, are sent to the cemetery and buried, and then resurrected, alive and well, ready to help Gables implement his plan. In fact, Lois stumbles onto one of those inmates at Mason's funeral, but the matter was quickly dismissed. Early one morning, having received a phone call from Albie, whose conscience has gotten the better of him, goes to meet him at the cemetery to get the story, but is instead attacked by one of Gable's men and is forced to take refuge in a coffin belonging to yet another recently dead inmate that is then buried and sent via an underground tunnel to Gables himself. Clark, with Scardino in tow, realized Lois likely went to check on Gables herself. The pair head to his place, find Lois and Albie tied up, and learn of Gable's plan to steal the virus with the dead inmates and release it all over Metropolis. Superman arrives at Star Labs just in time to stop them, freezing the airborne virus and tossing it into space. At the end of the day, Clark asks Lois to go see a movie, to which she agrees, but is then faced with another prospect when Scardino appears and asks Lois about a possible date.
Hi.
Agent Scardino.
Please, call me Daniel. May I come in?
Well...
Sorry to drop in on you like this, but I was thinking, maybe if we started working together... And look who's here. If it isn't the man with the smoldering eyes.
What are you talking about?
Mason's diary. Pretty steamy stuff. Read like an Emily Bronte novel.
You read Emily Bronte?
Well, what can I say? I'm a hopeless romantic. Oh, Ramaki. My favorite.
Too much curry.
It's perfect. I like it spicy. Anyway, Kent, she wrote some really passionate purple prose, mainly about you. And you said you two were just friends. You holding out on me, Kent?
You have to understand, Clark was probably the only person in Metropolis that didn't know that Mason was madly in love with him.
Mm-hmm.
Who's holding on to who, Scardino? You took the diary.
I'm willing to share. You work with me, I'll work with you. Now, what have you got for me?
Well, the last word Mason said before she died was resurrection.
The last entry in her diary was resurrection equals McCarthy with a question mark.
Okay, so a little bit in the investigation.
Yeah, so Gables, in the first scene when he appears, was supposed to also be popping vitamin C pills constantly, but I guess they cut that out for whatever reason. That's what the script said. There was an extra line where Clark is at the funeral, and, you know, he's kind of mopey, and he's like, I should have gotten there sooner, you know, something like that. Typical superhero, you know, gravitas,
right.
You know. The gravedigger was supposed to have an extra line to Lois when she's asking him about that body that he's burying, the coffin. He's like, you know, you better get out of here. You'll be the first person to get ejected from a cemetery. Cheesy. Lois tells Jimmy, she says, I've heard of people scouring the obituaries for apartments, but never for women. Just throwaway line, you know, trying to be a little comedic there. I was like, all right. There was supposed to be a silent, this I thought was kind of interesting because, you know, in the past, Lois has always, like, when someone's smoking when they're not supposed to, it's happened, I think, 2 times where she's, like, mentioned to someone who's smoking they're not supposed to, and she's, like, gets mad at him. Well, in this one, you know, when Lois dresses up as the janitor, and Clark as well, that guy comes by and just litters on the floor right in front of him. And, you know, she looks around, she's like, ugh. You know, and she just picks it up and throws it away. But in the script, that person, that office worker, was supposed to stop, and the two of them were supposed to, like, stare at each other, like, angrily. You know, like, she can't believe that he's just littering, and then, you know, he's just like, well, you're a janitor, you know, whatever. I don't care. So it was just this little altercation, and then Clark looks at her, and he goes, you know, I always thought you were in the wrong profession, Lois. I don't know. So, yeah. And then, let's see. After they were tied up by Scardino that first time in Mason's office, Clark breaks the rope and they get out. But in the script, for some reason, I don't know why they wrote this in, but as they go to leave, a security guard comes up and stops them and catches them. And then the next scene is just as it was in the episode. They're back in the Daily Planet. There's, like, no follow-up to them being caught by the security guard.
Okay.
You know, it's like, why even have that in the script then? You know, I mean, I guess it's an amusing ending because, you know, they finally get out of their situation and they get caught again. But I don't know, with no with no resolution, it's weird. Originally, Clark and Lois are talking and she's saying, you know, you never said anything about our date. You know, it's been a week, da-da-da. You know, and in the episode, he's like, well, I'm sorry. And he's going to talk more, but then Scardino shows up at the door. He interrupts him with a knock. In the script, he was going to hear Lois cooking something, or he was going to smell the oven burning because she was cooking something, and that's why he doesn't get to answer that question. You know, she's like, whatever happened about our date? And he's like, well, you know, I'm sorry. Is something burning? You know, and he goes to check the oven, and that's when Scardino comes in. And to me, I'm glad they went the way they went, because that's just like another excuse for him to get out of things.
Yeah, too many excuses for him to not answer the question.
Exactly. It's wearing thin. I'm sorry, Clark, but it's wearing thin. So Scardino, when he breaks in to Lois's apartment, he was going to do it with a marble statue, not a gun. I don't know. I guess she wouldn't have a marble statue on the porch or whatever, so they decided to change it to a gun, which makes sense because he is a DEA agent, I guess. And then finally, at the end, and I imagine that they cut this or they changed this premise because of visual effects, maybe money. Instead of Superman using his super breath to freeze the virus, he was supposed to fly around the virus to gather all the particles together and then use his breath to guide it out into space. So I'm thinking the flying bit is probably, you know, in that such a small amount of space, maybe they thought, well, we can't do that this episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Okay. Okay.
Quite a story, kids. I give my set of gold-plated Elvis spoons to know what makes a guy like Gables tick.
Well, that's the way it is today. Everybody sees themselves as a victim.
It's like nobody takes responsibility for their actions anymore.
Well, I, for one, take responsibility for mine right now. I got a paper to put to bed. So I can get out of here in time to have a little candlelight dinner with Alice.
Night, Perry.
Night.
Night, Chief. So, Lois, you want to go see a movie or something?
Yeah, that sounds nice. Something funny.
Yeah, I'll call and see what's playing.
Hi.
Hi.
I just came by to thank you for what you did today.
Oh, that's okay.
And also to ask you a question. What would you say if I asked you out sometime?
Are you asking me out?
Well, I didn't say that. I said, what would you say if I did?
I don't know.
Tell you what. The agencies keep me around Metropolis for a while. Why don't you think about what you might say, and we'll talk.
Well, looks like you have some choices to make.
Okay, so let's get into the main story. And our lead here, virus villainy.
Yes.
Previously on Lois and Clark, Mason has sadly passed away, and we are at her funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And Lois comes across a dead guy who isn't quite dead.
Right.
And there's these two guys, Gables and Albie, and they quickly counteract something they're talking about. It's this resurrection drug that, allows people to appear dead.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to, go and top the guy up to make him appear dead again, and Lois looks like a crazy person.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so at the end of the last episode, we sort of get this setup that, this is going to be a continuation of sorts. And it's kind of like we talked about. This episode really doesn't have much to do with anything on the previous episode.
No.
It's just that she mentions resurrection and then dies. I know she threw out there that she's working on a lot of stuff and she doesn't have all day waiting around for Lois and Clark.
Right.
But she just randomly mentions this one thing that she's been working on.
Yeah. And it's not like a major thing. It's this is a big thing if this virus gets out and everything. But as far as the whole overall Lois and Clark storyline goes, it's really just a plot of the week.
It really is.
So it's I guess in Mason's world, if we put her if we get in her mind, I guess it's sort of is big in her world because everyone's going to die if this virus gets out. But, since we're not following the world of Mason, to us it's all right, fine.
And then the DEA shows up and they're looking into Mason's death. Why would you do this in front of reporters for the Daily Planet?
Yes.
They're going to look at it and go, the DEA's looking into it. It must have something to do with drugs.
Yes.
So let's look into that. It gives them the starting point to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like if the ATF shows up, well, there's got to be something to do with guns going on around here.
Well, I think we're still going from the premise that, they're reporters, but they're also kind of like police officers. So it's okay for them to work together.
And, no sooner that we've lost Mason, this quote-unquote third wheel between Lois and Clark, we get a new introduction of Scardino. And,
yes.
I don't know about his introduction to the episode. They go to Mason's office to try and find some clues and whatnot, and find Scardino has already broken in. And he ties them up. And, that's obvious, he must be a bad guy then. Why else would you tie someone up and just leave them there? And then it's revealed that he is a DEA agent. And I'm like, okay, I get it. They're setting him up as this, reckless agent. But that's really reckless. That's reckless endangerment. Right? To just tie someone up and leave them in an office. What if nobody came by?
Exactly.
It would still be tied up there.
All right. So it's the whole thing about this Scardino. And I think some of this was going to be in the bylines, but as long as we're bringing it up now. This character is supposed to be like Lethal Weapon, Mel Gibson.
Exactly. The Hawaiian shirt.
You get that.
Yeah.
Yes. And just his whole attitude, his hair even is wild like Mel Gibson's kind of was in the Lethal Weapon series and everything. So you got the love triangle that we've had for a season and a half now. The love triangle of Superman, Lois, and Clark. right? This season we introduced Mason, and so the love triangle shifts a little bit because Lois is not so interested in Superman, it seems like, and they're trying to develop Lois and Clark, and then we got Mason coming in. So now we got that love triangle. That's gone because Mason dies. And now we got this love triangle now of Lois, Scardino, and Clark. And of all the love triangles we have, this one just annoys me the most. This one just seems so forced. They just started to date, Lois and Clark. They just started to date. They went on a date. And already Lois is looking at Scardino like, oh, well, who are you?
I don't know why they keep feeling the need to throw people between them. I mean, when it was Lex, that made sense. Like, Lex wanted to get between Lois and Superman.
Yes.
And not necessarily Lois and Clark, because, of course, Lex doesn't know that Clark is Superman. And that was good, It was good for him as a villain. It made sense that he would want what Superman wants, or what Lois thinks Superman wants, or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, when we start throwing these people between Lois and Clark, Mason was fine. They set her up, but now she's dead, and they just immediately throw this other person out there.
Right.
And, change up the role as well. First it was Mason wanting Clark, and now it's Scardino who wants Lois. And, it's awfully convenient, right?
Yeah, and it just bugs me that Lois is, seemingly somewhat attracted to this guy. She doesn't know this guy at all. Aside from, lust at first sight, that's all she's got. There's not much else going on there. And, she knows that she's been on a date with Clark. They mentioned it in the episode. It's like, you know what? You were on a date with him, and you have feelings for him. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gone on the date. Why are you suddenly just acting interested in this other guy? You're hurting this guy's feelings. You're kind of being, I'm sorry, Lois, you're kind of being a bitch.
Calling her a bitch is maybe a little bit harsh. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day,
that would tick me off.
Yeah.
That would tick me off if I was dating her and all of a sudden she started acting interested in this other guy. When Clark hasn't been showing her non-interest, but someone just died in his life that they were friends with. It's like, it's okay if he's a little distracted for this week, but don't be so, I don't know. She's not thinking about Clark at all. This new guy shows up and he flirts with her, and suddenly she's starting to get into him. And it just, it bugs me.
Yeah, exactly. There's not even a mention that her and Clark are dating.
Yeah, she could say something. She could say something, anything. Especially when he even asks her out on a date. She could say, well, I'm sort of seeing Clark.
Yeah, me and Clark are kind of together.
It's like, God, this bugged me when it first came on, and it bugs me again. And being able to go back and look at the back issues, I'm glad. I am vindicated because other people feel the same way.
Yeah, but, all that aside, the fact that he is supposed to be getting between Lois and Clark.
Right.
The character itself, I really don't mind. I think he's kind of funny and goofy, and it seems like he's going to stick around for a little bit.
Yeah, and I would have been fine with the character himself if they didn't have to throw in this extra love triangle thing.
The whole thing about how, people always call him Scardino because, he's a cop of sorts, and he's always saying, hey, call me Daniel.
Yeah.
Every time someone says, hey, Scardino, hey, call me Daniel. I think that's a nice little character thing. And you're right, it is kind of a pseudo copy of Mel Gibson and Lethal Weapon, but hey, it's the mid-90s, so why not?
Exactly. We're going to take what we can.
Yeah. Lethal Weapon was the late 80s, so
right.
But I go with it. The character's fine. Anyway, he's got this whole thing about how he had tracked down this bomber. The bomb that killed Mason has been linked to this bomber, which is very strange because that guy actually died in prison very recently. So he thinks something's a little sus here, and Lois and Clark go to see this guy's mother. It's Sean McCarthy, and he's Irish too for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's just randomly Irish.
I don't know why.
Like an American can't have McCarthy as a last name, but whatever.
Nope. Exactly.
This is a really strange scene because McCarthy is the bomb guy for Gables. Did McCarthy know that Gables would use the bomb to try and kill Lois and Clark at McCarthy's mother's house? For all intents and purposes, killing his mother?
Right. I don't know. That is a good point because the point was to get the letters.
Yeah, exactly. Destroy the letters before Lois and Clark or anybody could get to them. But, is it so important that he would kill his own mother over this?
Yeah, I don't think that... Maybe I would say say that McCarthy didn't know, because I don't think he would want to kill his own mother.
It was an interesting thing about Superman getting the bomb, though. Because, of course, Clark hears the bomb.
Yeah.
And he just excuses himself to the bathroom or whatever. And then the next thing, it's just this shot of, like, a crash through the patio, the side of the patio there.
Right.
And I'm just like, I don't know, it looks strange, you know, because you don't really see, like, Superman go in there. It's just this blur of crashing, and then Superman pops up and goes, yeah, I was just scouting around and noticed this. This is very dangerous. All right, see you later.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was a weird effect. Then, of course, the whole thing with the mother, I was just like, seriously? I had an inkling at this point, because we saw the dead guy who was alive. You pretty much put it together pretty quickly that there's something going on here, and that resurrection is more than likely this drug that makes you appear dead. So, yeah, it's not that hard to put together. And then, of course, we're introduced to Gables, who was fired from Star Labs for creating this alpha virus that killed, like, 4 technicians there, and then he was fired, and he considers this a great injustice.
So he's going to destroy the city.
Exactly. He, too, was infected by the virus, and nobody cares about me.
Exactly.
Like your classic guy who just thinks that everything is about him. How dare they fire me? Like, I am a brilliant scientist. It's quickly, of course, uncovered that, yes, indeed, McCarthy is alive. And Lois and Clark get a photo of the guy that she saw in the coffin, and he was looking around Mason's car. So they go to her burnt out car and find the pill hidden away. And they do this thing about, like, her favorite movie or something. It must have been some sort of political thriller. Do you remember what it was?
Was it something, The Connection or something? I can't remember.
Yeah. But I guess maybe that's a part of it, because I never saw that movie, whatever it was.
I saw it on the wiki.
The French Connection, was
wiki.
that it?
Yeah, the French Connection.
Right.
And I looked on there. They talk about allusions to other things, and this is one of the things that they mentioned there, because they mentioned the movie. And apparently, in that movie, there are drug smugglers or something that they hide the drugs in various parts of the car. So that's where that come from.
So they got this blue pill, and they talk to McCarthy's old cellmate about what's going on. This guy called Big Buster Williams, played by, of course, Danny Woodburn, who is, he's a little person.
And he was in Seinfeld.
And he abruptly dies. So, yeah, you know, I think, like, when he dies in that scene, I'm immediately like, okay, I definitely know what's going on here. And it's, okay, so this is a crazy over-the-top villain plan, right? I mean, out of all the possibilities he could have of doing what he has to do, which is to kill everybody with this virus, he also wants to break a bunch of guys out of prison by making them appear dead. I mean, he couldn't just go and hire some henchmen. Like, he had to break all these guys out of prison with his death pill.
If Mr. Shaw could hire a bunch of longshoremen to stock shelves in the middle of the night, I'm sure that Stanley Gables could find a couple more longshoremen to do this for him.
It's like that thing when, did you ever see Plan 9 from Outer Space?
I don't know if I've seen that one. I know it's a classic, but yeah, I don't think I've seen that
Classic sci-fi, right? But in Plan 9 from Outer Space, the aliens have a plan. Plan 9, which is to resurrect the dead in order to try and enslave humanity. And you look at it and you go, what were plans 1 through 8 that failed? So you got to Plan 9, resurrecting the dead.
Yes.
It's that kind of thing. Like, did he go through his options and go, okay, I think we got a plan. I got this death pill. We'll break a bunch of guys out of prison, and then we'll infect the whole city and they will die.
Yes, exactly. And why? And speaking of, like, why did he even invent the death pill? Like, what's the practical applications of that beyond killing someone in jail and then getting them out?
You could realistically reenact Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, there you go. For the method actors, this is very important. I want this movie to succeed. I need to die for real.
So there is an attempt on Lois's life with this ominous guy who hangs around the cemetery. Like, I don't know if he works at the cemetery or what, and they've just paid him off to try and kill Lois if she ever shows up.
Right.
But he's there a few times, and I can only naturally assume he works at the cemetery, and he's willing to take some money if it means I have to kill someone. He's burying dead bodies anyway, so why not?
Exactly.
So Clark argues with Scardino over who should protect her. And of course, Scardino's like, well, I'm the agent here, Clark. I think I'm more qualified. But Lois is just like, look, the two of you, I don't need protection. It's a little like how, like, Clark would become Superman and fly outside her window and stuff, just keep an eye on her. But Scardino actually breaks into Lois's apartment.
Yes.
And she's just like a little freaked out by it. But then they have this whole heart-to-heart about how he's like, old partner was killed by McCarthy and stuff. And that's kind of why he's so motivated.
Whatever, Skirty, I tell you, I'm going to hate on this character. I'm telling you right now. Anyway, go on.
So, yet again, Lois is attacked by a random cemetery guy. And in order to get away, she ends up in Buster's coffin, who, at that moment, wakes up from being dead. Mm-hmm. And the coffin is like shuffled off underground,
yes.
straight to Gable's place. And there's this great 1997 graphic of the coffin like
the
going
computer.
across
Yes. So
Your
good.
coffin has arrived, and it comes out of like the fireplace. It's like
I know.
I don't know. It's kind of like a classic villain thing, but I kind of like that. I thought it was funny. Yeah, with his team assembled, they break into Star Labs and they release this alpha virus. Superman shows up and freezes it into a big spear and then chucks it into space.
I thought the blowing it into a icicle was a little bit cheesy. You know, like I was wondering how he was going to get rid of it. I thought maybe he would like do like he's done before, like inhale it, you know, and then go up to space. The thing that I thought was weird was the way the virus looked itself when he dropped the vial.
I don't know. It was like magical or something, right?
I know. It was like magical blue sparks or something. I was like, what the hell kind of virus is this? It was a little strange. That part was strange to me. But I mean, it's fine blowing it into icicle and throwing it out.
I don't know. This episode was just really strange in my opinion. At the end of the day, I'm just like, what an oddball episode. Especially since it was sold to us as a continuation of the last episode, which it really wasn't.
I mean, there's some good stuff in here. Like, as much as I hate him, you know, we introduced a new major character, you know, changing the dynamic of the relationship and everything. So that there is that. But yeah, the main story itself, you know, what's supposed to be the main story itself it's not that great.
Yeah, and it's not even like I hated it or anything, you know, or even disliked it. I just kind of looked at it and went, what a silly, weird episode.
Yeah.
Anyway, some bylines.
Well, you know, we didn't even mention Albie, the assistant there.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, he's from the Revenge of the Nerds. Mm-hmm. Played Booger in Revenge of the Nerds. He was in Moonlighting. In fact, he was going to be one of the, when I introduced myself this episode, I was going to use one of his Booger lines from Revenge of the Nerds. I was like, it's going a bit deep, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
There was something about, you know, where I would introduce myself by saying, and I'm just wanting to be between your creamy white thighs. Like, well, I don't know about that. Maybe I should skip that one this episode.
But yeah, his character was a bit weird too. Like, I don't know, it was almost inevitable that he would betray Gables.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, Gables' character was just so malevolent all the time. You know,
Yes.
when he's lying there and getting a massage that one time, and you can see, like, how his skin's all leading away, and it looked all flaky and stuff as he was talking, and it would just, like, flicker.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's gross. And then Albie's there, like, do we really need to do this? Are we doing this? And he just, like, freaks out on him. I'm like, all right, so Albie's just going to turn coat eventually.
Yep.
Which he does.
Exactly.
Okay, so apparently Aunt Jimmy is over.
When you wrote that, I was looking at it, I was like, is that a typo? Is that autocorrect? Like, what the heck is Aunt Jimmy? I'm like, oh, Angela and Jimmy were shipping. I got it. Okay.
Because this throwaway line, Angela is just a materialistic bitch. So Jimmy's on the prowl.
Yes.
So, yeah, so long, Angela. We hardly knew ye.
I know. As Dean Cain said, they weren't allowed to reuse her, like the actress. So, you know, the writers were good to keep it going as long as they wanted. And for whatever reason, they decided to get rid of it. I don't know if they were given an order to get rid of it or what, but yeah, they got rid of it.
What about Mr. Sunshine, the funeral director?
Oh, he was great.
He had some good lines. I mean, when they're trying to get out of there, like they got the information and he's trying to give them the hard sell on buying a coffin. And he says, oh yeah, shop around, kick a few handles.
Exactly.
And then of course they leave and he just goes, looky loos. Just storms off.
Yeah, he was fun. I liked him.
And then I guess we should talk about the ending with Scardino asking out Lois. I mean, Clark was right there. He heard the whole thing, and she doesn't say no.
I know. That's why I'm saying that's wrong. That's a very mean thing to do. That's a very bitchy thing to do. Your guy is right there that you are interested in, and someone else asks you out, and you don't say anything. I mean, obviously, my relationship with my girlfriend, we're a bit deeper in than Lois and Clark are at this point, but if something like that happened in front of me, I'd be pissed. You know, be like, what the heck?
Well, Clark doesn't even really react to it. He kind of just sort of throws it off under the guise of telling her that she has some choices to make in regards to the movies that are playing. But am I talking about choosing me over Scardino? Who knows?
Exactly. I'm like, you know, it's okay to get a little angry once in a while, Clark. This score just brings him off as a little bit wishy-washy, like, oh, whatever. You know, he's very passive-aggressive about the whole Scardino thing throughout the whole episode. You know, his sarcastic comments and whatnot. You know, especially this thing here at the end. You know, just say what you're feeling. Just say, you know what? Why didn't you tell him that we were dating? I don't know. I just, Scardino. Damn you.
But I think we're there. It's just an oddball episode all round, really, isn't it? All right, well, let's get into the quote vote.
What's everybody standing around for? This is a newspaper, not happy hour at Buckingham Palace. What are we here, the Daily Planet, or second stringers from the Weehawken Gazette? Am I making myself perfectly clear?
Now, we have a few people voting again, and we're at a tie again. So I'm back to using my hosting privileges here, and we've got a winner. So cue the music.
Kermit the Frog approaches a cliché Russian guy who has just been mugged. What just happened here is called a mugging?
No kidding. Took everything but watch.
Not a very successful mugging, was it? Let's see if I can do better. Kermit pins the man to the wall and steals his watch. Excellent! I just mugged you!
Are you out of mind?
No! My century! And I love it! Yay! And scene. Just the image of Kermit trying to hold up a Russian guy against the wall. Good.
Okay, so let's get into our second episode discussion. The episode is Tempest Fugitive, written by Jack Weinstein and Lee Hudson, directed by James Begdonis, and this originally aired March 26th of 1995.
Hello. Excuse me. I'm H.G. Wells. It's quite festive here, you know. Well, anyway, I've run into a spot of trouble. You see, I've been traveling with a companion in my time machine, and we've just come back from the future. Whew. Well, I've left him in the park, actually.
If this is a gag, you're dead.
So we stopped here because...
I'm sorry, sir. We're really busy this morning, so we're going to have to wrap this up. See, time travel, it's not possible. H.G. Wells wrote fiction, and he died in 1946.
I know you're Superman, and I need your help.
What? What did he say?
I said, if I could just have a moment of Mr. Kent's time, all his doubts will be quelled. Perhaps by meeting my companion from the future?
Yes.
Yes, quite.
Look, Lois, there's no reason for both of us to go.
There's no reason for one of us to go.
Well, so...
So, what did he really say to you, Clark? And if you really have a man from the future with you, why did you leave him in the park?
Oh, yes, well, I didn't want him to see the city. You see, the 22nd century is a peaceful, harmonious utopia. No violence, no crime. Without preparation, the poor Tempest would be horrified by the savagery of the 1990s. Oh, woo. Woo.
It's an ordinary day on the job for Lois and Clark when the H.G. Wells shows up, claiming to need Superman's help, he needs gold, and subtly telling Clark he knows a secret. Apparently, Wells has traveled to the future and brought a man from there back with him to the past to prove to his friends that his machine does work. Lois, Clark, and Wells go to the time machine in the park and see that the man, Tempest, is gone. Clark goes to, quote-unquote, call Jimmy, let him know they'll be out longer, but in reality, he goes off to stop a crime he heard. Apparently, Tempest used his limited time here to mug a man, stealing his watch, and then tricking a gun shop owner into giving him his gun and gold chains before shooting up his shop. Tempest returns to the time machine and makes Wells take him back to Smallville 1966 so he can kill Superman as a baby, a statement that confuses Lois. Luckily, Wells is crafty and not only drops the plans for the time machine in the ground, but sets the time machine to 1866 instead, sending him and Tempest back a century too early. While there, Tempest uses the modern semiotic weapon to embarrass Jesse James and rob the bank to get the gold they need to get to 1966. Meanwhile, Lois and Clark, using the Superman-created time machine, arrive in 1966 and witness the great bank robbery of 1866, leading leading them to realize that Tempest and Wells must have gone back too early. They follow suit and end up having a run-in with Clark's ancestors, helping them get through an altercation with Jesse James and getting an injured Marshall Kent to a hospital to ensure that his future generations are born. While Clark deals with that, Lois tries to spy on Tempest but is caught, and he reveals to her that she is known in the future as the most galactically stupid woman for not knowing that Clark Kent is Superman. Finally arriving in 1966, Lois and Clark go to the Kent farm, arguing the entire way about how Clark has lied to Lois all this time, with Clark trying his best to defend his decisions. They eventually come face to face with younger versions of his parents who have not seen any baby, nor are they able to have babies. Before Clark and Lois take their leave, Martha says that something seems wrong with Clark, that he just seems off. In the car, on the way to where Clark's spaceship crashed, they realize that Tempest must be doing something to baby Clark because Clark is starting to literally fade from existence. Lois goes on ahead and faces off Tempest, knocking him out and throwing away the kryptonite he placed around baby Clark, now allowing adult Clark to get back to full health. He faces off Tempest, easily subduing him, and then recreates the landing of his ship so that Martha and Jonathan can find him, restoring the proper history. Wells drops Tempest into an 1800s jail cell where he is seen as insane for screaming he's from the future, and brings Lois and Clark back to the modern day, right before he originally arrived, effectively wiping their memories of the whole incident and thus ensuring the future unfolds the way it was originally supposed to. Yes, that's right, what I just said.
Well, Lois Lane, independent career woman of the 1990s, you're about to be stranded in 1866 without the right to vote, own property, or write for a great metropolitan newspaper. God, I love irony.
So sorry, Miss Lane. I wish I'd never invented this contraption.
Keep loading the gold.
If you want to kill Superman, I don't know why you're going to Smallville or why 1966.
She doesn't know yet. Oh, this is good. This is really good. Lois, did you know that in the future you're revered at the same level as Superman? Why, there are books about you, statues, an interactive game. You're even a breakfast cereal.
Really?
Yes. But as much as everybody loves you, there is one question that keeps coming up. How dumb was she? Here, I'll show you what I mean. Look. I'm Clark Kent. No, I'm Superman. Mild-mannered reporter. Superhero. Hello? Duh. Clark Kent is Superman. Well, that was worth the whole trip. To actually meet the most galactically stupid woman who ever lived. Come on, Herb. Clark and Superman are dead. The future belongs to me.
Okay, so let's get deep into our investigation of this episode.
Okay, so of course we have Wells, played by Terry Kaiser. So good, such a good actor for this.
Bernie Lomax himself.
Yes, exactly. And apparently, what iReactions found is that a lot of what he put into the performance of Wells was just improvised. You know, all the lines are there and everything, but little touches here and there. You know, where Wells is amused by the elevator, how it works, and then the condiments at the hot dog stand, all that's improvised. You know, when he sees Tempest in the cowboy hat, and he's like, "Oh, you look funny in that hat." That's all improvised. That's stuff that wasn't in there. He just added, you know, because like he put himself in the mindset of a guy from the 1800s. How would he feel about all this? You know, like what would he think about it? You know, when he tries to cheer up Lois, he's like, "Hello, hello, hello." You know, that's all him. Just that's Terry Kaiser putting it into his character. I think it's great because I love this character of H.G. Wells.
Yeah, for sure.
As he also says, now this is in the script, but they cut it out of the episode when Clark rushes off and Wells is there with Lois and he's explaining things about the time machine. He had a line that said something like, "Well, you know, time travel in your vernacular is heck on the rods." I was like, okay, it doesn't really make much sense. I'm not sure what they're talking about, but okay. As Superman arrives and Tempest and Wells disappear, Tempest was supposed to look at Superman while they're fading away and make like a gun gesture towards him, which I thought would have been cool. They should have put that in the episode. That would have been awesome. You know, like he sees Superman, he's like, "Oh, by the way." you know, I'm going to get you.
You're dead.
Yeah, that would have been great. In the script, Lois struggles to explain what just happened to Superman. He's like, what's going on? You know, and Lois is like, I don't even know where to begin, and this and that. But in the episode, she just sort of talks about what happened. She's less flustered in the episode.
Right.
Makes her seem more strong, I think. Stronger character in the actual episode than the script. She's not as flustered. Lois says when they go back in time that she wants to we could solve the JFK assassination, and Clark is kind of dismissive of it. There's supposed to be a line there where Lois calls him, oh, Clark, you're so naive. You know, which true, because if you do have a time machine, you could solve these great mysteries. You know, that'd be pretty cool for a reporter. It's in character. There's an additional moment in the saloon. You know, we got Lois, who's, quote, the naked lady. There's supposed to be a scene where she looks around and suddenly notices that all the men in the saloon are checking her out. You know, which I thought that would have been a funny little moment there. Clark wasn't supposed to fly away right in front of Miss Martha. She was supposed to turn to help someone else, and when she turns back, all she sees are the saloon doors swinging. So instead of revealing that, oh, this guy can fly, what? Yeah, it was sort of left a little more ambiguous. When Wells tells Lois that she'll be good with babies, you know, she was supposed to act like surprised, like, what? Babies? I'm not having any babies. You know, but in the show, she just sort of there's no reaction at all. Superman, when he says to Tempest, you know, my mother made this costume. Tempest was supposed to be gone already, and Superman was going to say that to Lois. But I think it worked better this way. It was much more dramatic saying it to Tempest himself.
Yeah.
And then finally at the very end, instead of Tempest being in a cell, he was supposed to be in a caged wagon, you know, like one of the big paddy wagons.
Oh, they probably already had the cell there on this old Western backlot or whatever, wherever they're shooting.
Yep.
So why not go for that?
Exactly.
Are you okay?
Just tired.
I've never seen you look so pale, even from kryptonite.
I'll be fine. I just need to rest a little bit.
Look, I'm sorry I was so hard on you before about, you know. Must have been really hard all those years, having to hide and pretend, not being able to share. I'm sorry you had to go through that alone.
I wasn't alone, Lois. I always had my parents. And you. Maybe there were a lot of things that I couldn't say, but there was nothing I couldn't feel. I just gotta wake up here.
You know, we're miles from the kryptonite. You shouldn't be feeling this. Clark, your hands.
It's Tempest. He must be changing the past.
Alright, so let's get into our main story here and our lead. Time travel, Tempest trouble.
Yes.
So, we start off at the Daily Planet, and we're having a celebration for Perry's birthday, and Lois, I don't know, it's kind of weird, but Lois, like, doesn't have a present for Perry. Like, she's so busy that she has Jimmy going by stuff. But it's like, I think they're setting up to have, like, everybody have dialogue here, right? Because we're going to visit it later. But H.G. Wells shows up, and it's Terry Kaiser from Weekend at Bernie's, a nice little Rewatch Podcast tie-in here.
Mm-hmm.
It did take me a minute to figure out that it was Terry Kaiser, though, I have to admit.
All I knew, like when he showed up, I was looking at him like, man, he looks so familiar, but I didn't know it was him until I actually looked it up, like later on. I was just like, man, I know that face from somewhere. Now, when I originally saw it back, you know, when it first came out, I didn't realize that.
The thing is that in Weekend at Bernie's, he's really, like, he's in, like, half the movie.
Right.
At the beginning. And then, like, halfway through, he dies. So he's just a dead body flopping around for the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he's dead for the whole second movie as well. So,
right.
Yeah, it's kind of weird just to actually see him acting. And honestly, he is, like, so great in this role.
Oh, yeah, he's great. I mean, this character, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but he is a fun character to have, and we definitely are going to get our fill of him in this show.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, like, the way he delivers these lines, and he just seems, like, so happy all the time.
Yeah. Well, like I said in the investigation, this is just, like, I think that was just his ad libs, you know, like all the little things he added in there just made him seem so happy. I don't know if they said in the script to be happy or what. I just think that he took it, you know, and looked at it and thought, this is H.G. Wells. He comes from the 1800s or whatever, and he's just fascinated by all this new stuff. He's a time traveler. He's an explorer. He's like, of course he's going to be fascinated by these little hot dog stands with little pumps of ketchup and stuff like that. And so I think that's what he did. Like, as an actor, he made that choice, I think. It was great.
Yeah, it's a good direction to go, to just have this sense of wonderment wherever he is or whatever he's doing.
Yeah, because it could have been a very, like, boring part. You know, it could have been very dry, but he made it something more.
Yeah, and the fact that it's H.G. Wells, and you're like, you know, you could look at it and go, okay, it's H.G. Wells, and he actually is a time traveler. But, you know, at the same time, Superman's a fictitious character. So
yeah.
Why not try to weave in this, you know, side mythology and sort of just have a bit of fun with it?
I like anything with time travel. So I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, that's another point too. I mean, I love a good time travel story. So Wells immediately pulls Clark aside and says, look, I know you're Superman, and I really need your help with something right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't know, it's kind of a throwaway bit, but when he sort of pulls Clark aside and says that, Lois is like, what'd you just say?
Right.
As if she heard him.
I know, because it's like suddenly Clark's all like, okay, what do you need? You know? And Lois is like, wait a second. What's going on here?
Yeah, and of course, like, Clark's, like, trying to get rid of her because Clark is suddenly like, okay, I'll go with you. She thinks he's just a weirdo. But since Clark is going, well, she'll go along too. But yeah, he's trying everything like, oh, yeah, you're right. Why don't you just go back to the office and check that out, Lois? And she's like, no, I'm sticking with you. It's a lot of fun. So Wells lays out that he's just come back from the 22nd century from Utopia, and he's brought with him a man who had volunteered to come back in time with him, named Tempest.
Appropriately enough. They didn't get, like, Bob. They got Tempest.
But he sort of, like, he lays out a couple of things. I mean, at one point he does say, look, I'm not going to tell you all this stuff because of spoilers and all that jazz. But he does lay out a couple of things, that Utopia was founded by Superman and Lois Lane. He also mentions that Tempest comes from a line of Superman's descendants, but he won't tell Lois, like, who Superman married or anything like that.
But wait, did they say that Tempest was from his descendants? I thought he said that Utopia was built by his descendants, but not Tempest.
Well, I don't know. I kind of took it that Tempest might be a descendant, because later when he is mugging that guy, quite a funny little scene there, he picks the guy up and presses him up against the wall to steal his watch. And I thought, okay, so yeah, he's got this strength to him. But then, of course, later they get into kryptonite and stuff, and that doesn't seem to affect him. So I don't know. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I never thought he was related to Superman. I just thought he came from that time period. And maybe, I don't know, maybe something about that time period makes him stronger than normal, because he didn't look like especially buff or anything like that. Maybe there's something in that world where people have advanced to a different physical, I don't know, part, like maybe they're just stronger in that era, you know? I don't know. I just never thought he was related to Superman.
Well, I guess at the same time, like, in a utopian society, less pollution, better quality of air, better quality of life. You know, maybe you're right. Maybe he is just, you know, naturally stronger because of, you know, the conditions that he's used to living in.
Right. Yeah. I always thought that it was just like the world was created by Superman and Lois. You know, like the peacefulness and everything like that. And he just didn't like that part of it. Maybe he's just angry and he gets, you know, he had his adrenaline going.
Yeah, and that's pretty much his whole thing, is that he really hates the peaceful society that he comes from. So that's why he's just totally enamored with the 90s. You know, there's all these muggings and the stupid guy at the gun store and all this stuff. And you think that he just robs the guy. But, of course, it turns out that the time machine needs gold in order to operate.
To run. Which is, I don't know if that's, like, I remember reading the original H.G. Wells time machine story. I don't remember if that's how it ran or not. I don't even know if they specified in that original story.
Yeah, no, I can't remember. I know I read the book when I was in high school, but yeah, I can't remember anything about gold or anything like that. But I don't know, it's an interesting idea, you know? Yeah. And it kind of explains why they're there. What are we, 1995?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, they could only come back as far as then because, well, they need gold to get going.
Right.
And that's why he also needs Superman's help. You know, he's kind of tracked him down. Maybe you could help me out, get some gold.
Exactly.
Because, you know, H.G. Wells isn't going to go out and mug people. He probably doesn't have the money to go and buy it. So, hey, Superman, get me some gold.
You know, when I first saw this, it didn't remind me of this, but when I was watching the new Flash series, season 1, for some reason, I just really took to that show. Loved it.
Yeah, I agree. It was pretty good.
Yeah. And then, I watched it with, the kids love it. It's a good family show, that type of thing. When I was rewatching this, it like hit me in the head. I'm like, oh my God, this is like what happens in spoilers alert for those of you who haven't been watching The Flash, because this is going to tell you something here. This is Tempest coming back from the future to kill Superman as a baby, which is similar to what in The Flash happens with the Reverse Flash coming back to the past to kill Barry. And I'm watching this time, and I'm like, I'm loving the Tempest story. I'm like, oh my God, maybe this is why I love The Flash so much. It's like this episode, loved this episode when it first aired, and then it just calls back now for me to The Flash, and I'm like, this is so good. I like it.
Yeah, no, I didn't think of that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Tempest's motivation, now that he has gold, is to go back in time and kill Superman, because, Wells knows that Clark is Superman, and in his utopian society, of course, Superman's secrets are out now. He's told everybody and founded this utopia. So he knows they need to go back to 1966 when Clark landed in Smallville, and there he will be able to find baby Superman and kill him. But Wells is onto it. He manages to he diverts them to 1866 while Tempest is busy monologuing.
Yes. Thank goodness for villain monologuing.
Yeah, and then he manages to talk his way out of it too once they're there by saying, like, it's not my fault you used an inferior grade of gold.
Right.
We're back in time, but obviously we went too far.
Villain monologuing, saving superheroes since 1939.
And he also leaves behind plans for the time machine, allowing Superman to go ahead and build one. So they're in 1866, and they run into, of all people, Jesse James.
Yeah.
Do you recognize the actor?
Well, I'm watching it this time. Now, originally I did not when I first watched it, but I'm watching it this time. I'm like, God, he looks like Patrick Swayze. It could be like a double for him. Like, this must be like, I wonder if this was a stunt double or something. And then like the show goes on. I was like, I looked it up later. I'm like, what? It's Don Swayze, a brother, I guess. I had no idea.
Yeah, no, I saw it too, and I'm like, I know that Swayze had a brother who did some acting.
I didn't.
This must be him.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's pretty cool. Like, I wonder what I should have looked to see if he's still doing acting, because he could fulfill a lot of these parts that they wanted Patrick for, unless Don's just not as good. I don't know.
Back in present day, of course, Clark shows up with this bag full of, I guess, raw gold that he went and dug up somewhere, and says that Superman was too busy. He filled in Clark, and he and Lois can go and figure all this stuff out together, which... it's funny. I've been talking a lot over the last few weeks about like how obvious it is and why can't Lois see what's going on.
Right.
Tempest is going to bring this up a lot in this episode.
Yes.
So it's kind of good that they're addressing this. But yeah, the fact that Clark suddenly shows up and he's going to use the time machine, he knows exactly how to use it as well. Alarm bell should be ringing. But they go to 1966, Smallville. Tempest and Wells aren't there, but they conveniently see this reenactment of a famous robbery at the bank. And that leads them to believe that this robbery was actually pulled off by Tempest and Wells back in 1866.
Right, because the characters in the reenactment looked like they were Tempest and Wells, dressed the same way.
So, I don't know. I kind of roll with that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think it's cool.
Lois and Clark go to 1866, where Clark has to help Marshall Kent, and Tempest reveals Superman's identity to Lois.
So the whole, we have it in the bylines, but we could talk about it here. Marshall Kent and Lady Martha, or Miss Martha. Obviously we know what they were going for here with the whole Back to the Future type reference here. His great grandparents or his whatever, they look just like his parents. Why? Because why not?
Yeah, but this is something that irked me actually about Back to the Future 3.
Yes.
When they did this, okay, right?
Yep.
In Back to the Future 3, Marty's great-grandparents look like him and his mother.
Yes.
And they are the McFly family, which comes from his father's side.
Right.
So you're like, okay, so somewhere down the line, his mother's descendants were already involved with his father's descendants?
Right.
And you're like, that family tree doesn't quite make sense. Now,
Nope.
here, they don't really say that Marshall Kent and Miss Martha have a relationship. Like, maybe
Right.
they did, but and maybe they don't
Exactly.
roll with it or have children, and then later down the line, their descendants hooked up in the form of Martha and Jonathan. But, yeah, like, you're just a bit like... That family tree doesn't have a lot of branches, does it?
No, those branches, they grow back into each other and whatnot.
So I'm going to go on the side of maybe they kind of had something for each other, but nothing really developed there.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good.
Let's just hope
We'll go
so.
with that. Yeah, because I like when they do that, though, when they have the original actors play, descendants and things like that. I think it's cool. It gives them a chance to like stretch themselves a little bit. It's like in the I bring this up because we watched it recently. In the Brady Bunch, you have the mother and the father who played their grandmother and grandfather. So, it's all good. It's giving them a chance to stretch their acting chops. I'm fine with it.
Well, at least in the Brady Bunch, the sisters and the brothers weren't like blood related or anything. Like that, so.
True.
They're still a little kind of okay about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, of course, Tempest reveals to Lois.
In the best way.
Of course. Pulling off a pair of glasses and then putting
so
them back
good.
on to demonstrate the difference.
I know. Hello, I'm Superman. No, Clark Kent, mild mannered reporter. Oh, Superman. It was just so good. I love his speech.
And he pretty much voices the way I've been feeling.
Duh.
How could you be so galactically stupid?
Yes.
Which, I mean, that's a bit harsh, okay? I don't feel that badly towards Lois. I wouldn't say that to her. But yeah, it is a bit like, oh, how have you not seen it?
I know. I wouldn't feel that way about her.
But I love her reaction. She's pissed.
Oh, yeah.
Clark, you've been lying to me this whole time. I don't even know you. And it takes her a while to come around.
Oh, yeah.
I also like that, when he asked her how she got there, that she was onto it as well and just said, oh, I grabbed onto the back of your machine here.
Right,
so it's not to lead him to know that they also have a time machine and Clark is also there with them.
No, it was a good scene. Good, quick thinking on her part.
And of course, he's going to go to 1966. They now have the gold they need. So he's thinking, ha, 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 I'm so evil. You strong 90s woman, you can now stay in 1866.
Yes.
You have no rights. Enjoy. And he's off to, enact his plan. They arrive in Schuster's Field, but as Lois and Clark are driving there, Clark sort of, like, when he tells the story, it's like dusk, I guess, when his ship arrived and Martha and Jonathan found him. And when they get there, they find the ship's already landed.
Right.
So this is like contrary to what he knew. And of course,
Right.
Tempest has already taken young Clark. He's actually weakening the child by actually surrounding him with kryptonite. And I didn't mind this either, as a way to kill Superman. Yeah, he's a baby.
Oh, yeah.
And then give him some kryptonite to play with.
Yeah, this was good.
Clark and Lois go to see Martha and Jonathan. I mean, they get talking, and, of course she's, nice to them and everything, homestead lady on the farm and stuff, and she invites them in for some buttermilk and whatnot.
Right.
But then there's suddenly just that weird segue where Lois is like, did you find a baby by any chance? And Martha just it's like she's on the verge of tears immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, you brought up babies. I can't have babies and stuff like that. I think the natural reaction would be like, no, I didn't find a baby. What kind of question is that? No, immediately
I know.
she's just upset. Every time somebody brings up babies, she's going to burst into tears because she can't have a baby.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's wouldn't you think this? Years later, they wouldn't remember this weird interaction they had with two people who showed up, and boy, that Lois looks just like that girl that we met back in 1966.
Right.
Asked about a baby. I don't know. It was funny. I was like, okay. But I mean, again, I go with it. I'm fine with it. When you have time travel, there's going to be some paradoxes. So you just got to deal with it.
Yeah, I agree. The whole episode, I mean, I can nitpick stuff and stuff like that. But
Right.
It's a perfectly fine episode, and I'm really enjoying it, actually.
Yeah.
And they get a lead from Jonathan that he saw some weirdos over by Rocky Cove.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where they head. And on the way there, Lois actually forgives Clark.
Yes.
I think she finally comes around to understanding that, he wanted to have a normal life, and the fact that he had this secret identity was kind of an accident. It's not something he he like intentionally wanted to lie to people, and she kind of starts to realize that, which I think is nice.
Yeah, well, the excuses that he gives and everything they're valid excuses. Like everything he says, they're very perfect reasons for wanting to have a secret identity. But then it's also easy to understand why someone would be mad, at being lied to. Someone that thinks that they're closer, than that they should have known, all this time. So they're both right. There's no one really in the wrong.
Yeah, and it's about this time, too, that I really start thinking about Back to the Future.
Yes.
Because Clark has been feeling real lethargic, and even, like, Martha brought it up, and he sort of encountered kryptonite before when they're at the ship, but he actually starts to fade away, Back to the Future style. And then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, 1866 in the Old West... That's Back to the Future 3.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just waiting for Clark to bust out a guitar and sing Johnny Be Good.
Now, there's a lot of Back to the Future stuff here with him, going back that far, meeting his parents, meeting his grandparents. Even when they first start the whole episode, H.G. Wells says, this is the flux facilitator, instead of the flux capacitor. So there's a lot of it in there.
With Clark all week, it's kind of up to Lois to fight Tempest.
Yeah, that's why I think he's not super strong, and the kryptonite doesn't affect him. So I think he's just a normal guy.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a little all over the place, really, when you think about it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Does he have strength like he did before when he picked up that guy? But then, Lois busts out some judo on him and he's down.
Yeah, I think he was just feeling the adrenaline, the rush of being back in the past, and like, oh, I get to actually mug someone. I've never done this, but I've read about it, So I think he's just excited, and that's why he lifts him up like that, That's my theory, anyway.
And then, of course, she frees Wells, gets the kryptonite away from baby Clark, and then Clark picks up the ship and fakes the crash at nighttime, allowing Martha and Jonathan to find him. And thus plays out the classic story that we know. Now, the ending.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's cool that Wells, drops Tempest back in 1866.
Yes,
and
love that.
Has him in the prison acting all crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But then he takes Lois and Clark back to just before he arrived. And for some reason, this wipes their memory of everything that happened.
It's a little Superman 1 with, the super kiss that makes her forget everything, Or is it Superman 2? No, I think, Superman 2.
I understand. Maybe it was like they want to give us a taste of what it would be like if Lois knew the truth. But we're not quite ready to go all the way here yet because we really want to let it play out naturally. Which is kind of where Wells comes from, too. I need to make sure that your relationship develops organically. Or else the utopia will never exist, It's kind of like there's a set way that utopia comes about. So I need to sort of correct the timeline. So they need to have a reason. I just wish they came up with a better excuse than, well, if I take you back before I showed up, then you'll forget.
There is an explanation that someone attempted in the back issues. So we'll leave it for that because it's a pretty good explanation. I like it. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, all right, we're going with that.
Yeah, but Lois tries to leave herself a clue because earlier she got a card from Jimmy for Perry as well. And on the back of that card, she writes, Clark is Superman. When they go back in the office and they replay that scene from the beginning, and she goes, oh, where's the card? Oh, here it is. Lifts it up. Clark sees it, snatches it away from her, and tears it up and throws it away. What do you think he's thinking at that point?
He's probably like, what the heck?
I'm like, he must have thought Lois wrote that down.
Yeah.
Like, why would he immediately just be like, oh, crap, I'll take that from her before she sees it? She wrote it.
Right. Exactly.
He wouldn't know that she'd forgotten that she'd wrote it. So, yeah, I don't know. The ending irked me a little bit there. But
a little bit, yes.
As a whole, I love this episode.
Yes.
I think it's great.
Yeah. It was this is one of my favorites. And like I said, we will see H.G. Wells again. And, of course, spoilers alert, Tempest again. So it's awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's not like the prankster, where you're like,
no.
Oh, okay, let's do the prankster again. Why not?
And like we had this to be continued thing that happened, which wasn't really a to be continued thing. I know that when Tempest comes again, it's a multi-episode arc. So we're going to get a real good, at least from what I remember in my rose-colored memory glasses, it was a good arc. I enjoyed it. So I'm just excited.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. All right, so let's do some bylines.
All right, so I don't know if you noticed this. I had the captions on, and I heard it, and I was like, what? And I had to go back to watch it. And it just made me, like, I literally laughed out loud. Very beginning of the episode, and of course, it happens again at the end when they recreate that opening. There's a guy in the background. He's standing there, and he's looking ahead, and he looks completely dazed. And there's a guy in front of him, and he says, and it's in the captions, and you can hear it, he's like, I told you not to photocopy with the lid up. How many fingers am I holding up? It's like, it just made me laugh. You got to go back and watch that. Just, it's the first, like, 5 seconds, and the guy's just standing there. He looks completely like he just got, like, smacked or something. It was so good. Just a little touch of color there for the episode.
Well, that scene reminds me of another, like, pseudo time travel movie, Groundhog Day, right?
Oh, yeah.
There are so many scenes in that where they have to replay the same scene over and over again, and there's always people in the background doing things, dropping things, saying stuff, So, yeah, I think that was supposed to be, like, their Groundhog Day. It
was so good. Yeah. It was so funny. I was like, what the heck? This guy photocopying with the lid up and he's like blinded.
Well, talking about things like that, when Clark goes to use the time machine, and in the new time machine that Superman built, it's not like H.G. Wells where he has like the little flick screen. It's got like a keyboard and a computer screen. Clark just like mashes at the computer keyboard and it types in 1966 Smallville. I'm like, there is no way you wrote that. You just mashed at the keyboard.
Exactly. It was weird because it said 1966 Smallville, USA. No state, like there could be more than one Smallville in the United States.
It's true, and we know Smallville's in Kansas, so
yes, it's like what the heck. Whatever, it's all good.
Okay, so getting back to Don Swayze and Jesse James.
This was good, yes.
The whole thing about how Tempest has this semi-automatic weapon, and it sort of makes Jesse James have, like, gun envy. He has this whole conversation about, like, how size never used to matter and whatnot.
I know. His was just bigger, Jesse. It happens to every man. Oh, it was so good. Yeah, it was a fun little bit of comedy here.
Honestly, I like Don Swayze. I mean, he's no Patrick Swayze, but...
Right.
But give me more Don Swayze in anything. Come on.
Yeah, gotta look at more of his movies. Now, this is kind of a deep cut. When they go back to 1866, Tempest has a throwaway line about this guy over there. He's like, unless that's Bob Dylan, and there's a guy over there, looks kind of like Bob Dylan carrying a guitar. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize this, but from the wiki, they mentioned this, that when you watch that, if you listen to what that guy is saying with the guitar, he's looking at a pump handle. And he says, I ain't got no handle, which is like, okay, whatever. But there's actually a Bob Dylan song, Subterranean Homesick Blues, in which one of his lyrics says, the pump don't work because the vandals took the handles. So it's a reference to that. It's like, well, that is a freaking deep cut right there. That was good. I was like, that's good.
Wow, yeah, that is a well-hidden line. Just
I know.
A dropped reference.
This pump ain't got no handle. Oh, well. And then, let's see, when they go back to 95, and Tempest sees the movie poster of The Penetrator, which just, first of all, it just makes me think, like, he must be looking at, like, a porn movie house right there or something
porn
like
parody,
that.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it says something about starring or in association with this guy, and the actual name they used on there was the director of the episode, James Bagdonis, or whatever it was. So it's another little... Just a neat little touch they threw in there.
I love it.
And then finally, it's Perry's birthday, but we never even see Perry in this episode.
True.
Poor Perry. What the heck?
He's never going to get those check suspenders.
No.
Hello. What's the matter, my dear?
You've been to the future, Mr. Wells. Is it true what Tempest said about me?
Oh, yes. You're as highly revered as any woman in history.
Oh, no, I meant about being galactically stupid.
No, Miss Lane, not stupid. Blind. It is one of the many things that makes your story so timeless. Why children never tire of hearing it at bedtime. Why parents never outgrow it. Generation after generation. We are all blinded by love, Miss Lane. Especially that one great love that changes us forever.
Oh, excuse me, but I'm in danger of choking on my own vomit.
Everything's all right. The Kents have the baby.
Oh, good. Then we can start to make things right. Superman, you and Lois, meet me at the second time machine.
Where are you going?
To see to it, Mr. Tempest causes no more trouble.
Superman, as long as I have you here, just answer one thing for me. Why tights? Why a cape? You're a grown man. Don't you feel ridiculous?
My mother made it for me.
All right, well, let's get into some back issues.
All right, so this whole thing, I think we mentioned it before about the way it was going. It seems like Clark was kind of using Mason, but really, they were saying, well, he just wanted to let her down gently. He wasn't really playing with her feelings. He was just trying to be nice about how he did it. You know, like we said, he could have told her right away, you know, I don't have feelings for you, you know, but he didn't want to just come out and say it. He wanted to let it, do it more gently. That's what they were saying. And they were saying, they hope that this doesn't ruin, this relationship that Lois and Clark have finally started to have. There's something that we've been waiting for. They hope that, it works out this year for Lois and Clark. They don't want it to be like, oh, here comes another person, that's going to interfere with our relationship, and it's
Scotino.
Yeah, exactly. And they said, it's funny how Lois was worried about Clark, thinking, that he was treating her like yesterday's news, but it becomes the opposite of that right away with Scardino. It's like, what the heck? And they were disappointed because Clark is now just seems to be just a coworker again. Like all of a sudden Scardino shows up. It's like, oh, it's just Clark. He's not a romantic prospect suddenly. It seems like she just wants to be with Scardino all of a sudden for whatever reason.
I'm really hoping they're going to address this in the coming episodes.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Like I said, I do not like Scardino at all. And other people are tired of Lois's attitude, how can she do that? Just be so interested. Scardino needs to go away. I'm like, yeah, I'm right there with you. Apparently, people were thinking that Mason would come back still. They weren't really believing that she was dead, and they were trying to think about ways that she could come back as Supergirl and be a superhero in this show. And I was like, I'd never even thought about that. That's different,
They'd have to change up the mythology of Supergirl and all that.
Oh, yeah, they would, And, they did mention some of the different versions of Supergirl from the past. We don't need to go into all of it there, but they were saying, well, maybe we could make this work. Because for some reason, they really liked Mason. They're like, let's kill two birds with one stone here. Let's bring Mason back and get her together with the DEA dude. That way they can go crime fighting together and leave Lois and Clark the frick alone. Right. Which is, I'd be fine with that, too. That would be fine with me. They just said they don't really like, Lois is just taking Clark for granted these days, it seems like, in these last couple episodes here.
Yeah.
They said the greatest part of the episode for them came when Perry told Clark, you're not going anywhere. I don't care what your excuse is. Sit down and write the story, which I admit. That was good because he's actually being an editor at this point,
Right, yeah.
And then they said, these excuses that Clark has, wouldn't you have, at one point said, I should come up with some better excuses and just hold those in check for whenever I need them?
Yeah, make a list, keep it in your pocket.
People for Tempest, they were wondering if, for some reason, I don't know why this came up under the Tempest Fugitive search, but they're wondering, does Perry know that Clark is actually Superman? Because, you don't get to the position that you are in, like the editor of the greatest metropolitan newspaper, without being pretty slick, pretty smart.
Yeah,
so
being a good reporter.
Yeah, exactly. So they're wondering if Perry knows. They talked about how the time travel explanation, like we said, doesn't really make sense, and how can they actually forget? Another guy was really down on the episode, and there were some other people that agreed with him about, this was just kind of full of these little silly cliches. The silver vest on Tempest, going back to the 1800s, like Back to the Future. Why didn't Clark's parents remember them? Why drop off Tempest, in some, little cage like he's a disposable villain? How come Lois doesn't know how to hide without making noise 2 times? She does that. She's trying to hide and makes noise twice, and of course, why can't Lois be allowed to figure out Clark is Superman instead of someone telling her? They don't like that someone has to tell her. She should be smart enough to figure it out herself. So
Well, that's exactly why they need them to forget by the end.
right, exactly. They said Lois's reaction was done perfectly, like we said, all the reasons and everything. It's like, that's how she would react. She'd be angry. But they said, I don't see how they can relive this same moment again, though, and be as effective as it was this time, because this is the first time. So the next time that she finds out for real that he is Superman, what is the reaction going to be? Is it going to be the same thing? She's going to be pissed off and then fine with it? Because that's boring. That's just redone again from what we already know. So they're wondering, how are they going to actually reveal it now, and what is her actual reaction going to be at that point?
They're going to have to earn that reaction.
Yeah. Exactly. As for, someone said, as for Lois not knowing that Clark is Superman, just accept it. It's just that way. I'm really surprised that after 50 years of pop culture, people still don't seem to realize that Lois just doesn't know. Is this a surprise to some of you? Have some of you people just never heard of Superman before Lois and Clark? That must be it. None of this is meant to be a flame, but I sort of feel like Tempest right now.
It's like our own little time travel here. Like they're talking at me from the past.
Right.
Just accept it already.
Exactly. And then this guy, I can't do Tempest's voice, but he wrote this little passage here in Tempest's voice, and he was like, hello, this is a fantasy. Lois just doesn't know that Clark is Superman. Or haven't you figured that out yet? Wait a minute, you don't know? Yes, Clark and Lois do love each other and do end up together. I can't believe you don't know. What are you, galactically pessimistic? So I wish I could hear the actor who plays Tempest. I don't remember his name is, but I wish I could hear him read that because it's so good, so good.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
And then basically, someone said, you know what, there's nothing to understand about this. The time travel thing, it just doesn't work. But who cares? The story was not about time travel. It was about Lois finding out his secret. And it was good. Even with the inconsistencies with the time mechanic, it was still good. The whole point of the show was, let's not focus on the time travel. Let's focus on her finding out. And that's what the main part of the episode should be about, is what they're saying. And I can agree with that. People were disappointed that Lois doesn't remember, like, oh, we waited all this time. And then people are hating on Scardino in the forums, which I'm glad. I wonder if the people over on Zoomo, what they think of Scardino after all this time, too, if they feel the same. And then at last, here is the explanation, all right? Now, this was a very long explanation. Like, he had multiple outlines posted in this thing, and people just sort of accepted it as being like, yeah, well, that sounds good, we'll go with it. I tried to boil it down to the very basics. What he says is, everything is made of energy. So if you time travel to the past, you're not supposed to be able to exist at the same time as past you, because that's the same energy. Baby you is using the same energy as you. So if you're in the same place, it could be like a paradox, just like in Back to the Future. Doc said something like that. You can't meet yourself. You shouldn't interact with yourself because it could have catastrophic changes. So you're not supposed to do it. So when he goes back into the past, since both of you are in the same place, you are kind of fighting for your survival back there. But the one that belongs there originally is the one that's going to win, and the one that doesn't belong there is eventually going to fade away. Now, we know it's because they're doing this kryptonite thing, but maybe it wasn't just kryptonite that was causing this problem. Maybe it was also this energy thing. So when Lois and Clark go back, when they're back in the 60s, it's like, all right, well, baby Clark's already there, so the energy thing, he's gonna get the energy. Future Clark there is going to disappear, because Lois didn't disappear because she wasn't back there in that time period. So now when they go back to the future, he takes them back. Wells takes them back right before they left. So now we have the Lois and Clark we followed for the whole episode, but then we have the Lois and Clark that are already there from the beginning, before they left on this adventure. Since they belong there, since they actually belong there, and the ones we just dropped off there don't belong there, they're going to fade away, and then we're going to be back with the original Lois and Clark that we had from the beginning, and they're not going to remember anything.
Right, so the ones we spent this whole episode with are gone.
Effectively gone, because the energy that they had to go towards the people who actually belong there, the versions of themselves that actually belong there. I think that actually does make a little bit of sense.
Yeah, it does kind of make a bit of sense. And I mean, I could list a few movies that sort of deal with this whole whole time traveling, interacting with yourself stuff. There's a great one called Southland Tales, directed by Richard Kelly, that has a lot to do with two of the same person meeting each other. And that kind of deals with like souls and stuff like that. Like, yeah, it's kind of like that energy thing.
Yeah.
But then there's other stories that kind of say, like, as long as you're a certain amount of years apart, because apparently the human body, all the cells in your body are replaced every 7 years. So technically, as long as you're more than 7 years apart, then you are no longer made up of the same physical material. So it doesn't really matter if you interact with yourself.
Yeah, no, I like it.
And I know we've mentioned a few other time traveling movies, including Back to the Future, Groundhog Day. So if I go too far into it, I'm just going to talk forever. So
yeah, no, it was good. I like the explanation. So good on you back in 1995 or 1996, whoever you were. I forget who it was, but yeah. Awesome.
All right. So our next issue, we're going to be discussing Target Jimmy Olsen and individual responsibility.
I just got to lower my expectations because this was such a good episode. I know I'm going to be a little put down by this one, but I think the Target Jimmy Olsen might be the spy one with his father.
Individual responsibility, I've got nothing.
I have no idea. Like, I'm thinking it's a throwaway villain episode.
Probably.
Well, we will find out next week because that's it for this issue of the Rewatch Podcast. Keep up with listener interaction by liking our Facebook page at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast or facebook.com/Lois and Clark Rewatch. Don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Rewatch Pod and visit our webpage at rewatchpodcast.podomatic, which has links to some of our favorite sites there, such as the aforementioned zoomway.net, the folc.wiki.com, and the supermanhomepage.com. And don't forget, we also have links to our archive of film rewatch episodes over there.
Yes, and don't forget, we will update you once we make a server change away from Podomatic at some point. Yep. It'll happen soon, but we will let you know. And as always, you can write us an email or record a voice message, send it to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. And also, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a rate and review on iTunes. 5 stars are appreciated, and if you write something nice, we will love you forever.
Exactly.
And you can also help support the Rewatch Podcast over at patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast and make a monthly contribution as little as $1. And of course, we're on YouTube, so search Rewatch Podcast and subscribe. All right. Well, thank you for joining me again, Tom.
Oh, yes.
And I will just say, until next time, you look quite funny in that hat, you know?
Hey, now, we gotta fly.
The Rewatch Podcast is not associated with Warner Brothers Television, ABC, Gangbuster Films Incorporated, or Roundelay Productions.
Don't believe everything you see on TV.
The use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided in United States Code Title 17, aka Fair Use.
Let's get legal on this.
Music provided by Kevin McCloud at incompetech.com.
Great shades of Elvis.
Copyright 2016, The Rewatch Podcast.
Where are your beepers? We'll be in touch.
Hi, Rewatch Podcast listeners. I'm Corey.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Nathan.
First off, let me say that we have all had a blast doing the Rewatch Podcast. Every week, we put out another episode for free for you. And although we enjoy these discussions with each other, we truly do this for you guys out there in podcast land.
That's right, Corey. But we are here today to tell you about Patreon. Every week, there are costs involved in podcasting about film and television, including hosting and bandwidth charges, our own personal internet usage, and film or show rentals and purchases. So, we're asking you to become a Patreon supporter.
If you can afford as little as $1 to throw our way per month, it would really help us keep the lights on. And if you want to send $100 our way every month, we wouldn't turn that down either. But it's your choice, and we appreciate the support you bring.
As always, we strive to bring you the best quality shows we can create, and we hope that you enjoy them. So head on over to patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast to become one of our patrons and show your support for the Rewatch Podcast.
And if we get enough patrons, we may even be able to produce exclusive content just for the supporters in the form of simply getting episodes before the main feed release, or even bonus film discussion episodes as a thank you for your support. The website again is patreon.com/Rewatch Podcast.
Thanks, everyone.